Let's talk about how to talk to people, how we approach every single conversation in our lives, and how that has really two paths that each conversation can go down. Because a conversation, people can leave that feeling bad. They can feel frustrated, they can feel friction, they can feel anger, they can feel all sorts of we'll just call that like a bundle of negative emotions. Or they can leave a conversation with you feeling really positive, feeling uplifted, feeling happy, feeling joy, feeling love. Let's take that as a bundle of positive emotions. That's the two ways that they can go. Let's talk about how we can get there. And what I want to share with you is things that I've learned over the course of my life that have helped me understand really how to communicate with people. And what that's resulted in is relationships with a lot less fighting, a lot less internal and external friction that you have with those people, a deeper sense of connection, more understanding, and really more empathy with the people that are around you. And when I say people around you, it's not necessarily just the people that are in your family or your close friend relationships or romantic relationships. This also works in business relationships. People you're working with, people you're working for, people that you want to sell something to, or even people that you want to buy something from. Every single one of those transactions happens because of the way that we communicate. What it really comes down to is people want to feel heard. And that's what I'm going to share how I figured out and what I've learned about that over the course of my life is everybody wants to feel heard, but most often people don't feel heard. Now, my bet is if you played back the last 5 or 10 conversations that you had that left you with that negatively charged bundle of emotions I talked about a minute ago, it's probably because you didn't feel like the other person heard you. They might have been there, they might have understood the words that you said, but understanding is way different than hearing. Hearing happens at a deeper level. And so everybody wants to feel heard. So communication, it is the most important skill that any of us can have, but we're practicing it when we practice it, usually in the wrong way. Right? If you think about communication, you think about all the different courses that you can buy on that, or going to Toastmasters, what that is about is they think communication is an outgoing process. It's to get other people to understand us, how to formulate a number of words in a particular sentence that means something to somebody else so that they can go, yes, I understand everything you just said. I feel like I get it. That's what we think of. And that is trying to get to the point really, really fast. Most times when we think about communication, we think about how can we make it the most efficient as possible, say the least number of words possible to get somebody to what I need them to understand. At least that's how they want to teach it when it comes to communication. But again, we're looking at that most often, and I looked at it wrong for a long time. I can't even tell you how many years. But the reality of understanding communication has nothing to do with outgoing and has everything to do with incoming. It's not getting other people to understand us. It's us being able to understand other people. And that means that we have to slow down, which I know nobody likes to do. Everybody wants something faster. Everybody's looking, how can I get the fastest result or the best result the fastest with the least amount of effort? I totally get it. But if we want to feel less friction, we actually want to communicate. And we actually want other people to feel heard and to truly be understood. We just have to slow it down a little bit. And I promise you, it doesn't take that much longer. So before we go on, I want you to think back to your last couple conversations. And there's two different things that were happening inside of that conversation, or two potential things that were happening in that conversation. So one is you'd actually be listening to the other person. And that is really trying to understand what they were saying. We like to think that that's what we're doing, but most of the time we're doing the other thing that could go down in a conversation, which is we're listening passively to what they say. We're watching their mouths move, but in reality, we're just waiting for our turn to talk. I'm super guilty of that. You just wait for your turn to talk. You're not listening to what the other person says. You're listening only for cues that tell you, oh, I can add something on to that. I can make a point and I can flip the conversation to being about me instead of being about the other person. So really the trick to this is that we've got to approach every single conversation with curiosity instead of judgment. That's a big differentiator. Like picture fork in the road going into every single conversation that you're having. And this can be, remember, inside of a family relationship or a romantic relationship. It can be inside of a business relationship, where if we go into a conversation with the mindset that, hey, I'm going to be curious about what's going on here versus I'm going to be judgmental about what's going on here, then we come out better when we go in curious. Now, judgment doesn't mean, by the way, that whatever somebody's telling you, you're judging them about what they've done. If somebody's telling you about their workout and you're judging if it's a hard workout or an easy workout, depending on what your version of a hard or easy workout is, that's not the kind of judgment that I'm talking about here most often. What I'm talking about, judgment, is the assumption that you have when somebody's talking that says, hey, I know where this conversation's going. I know what they're going to say next. You ever been around somebody that wanted to finish your sentences, but they were wrong like most of the time? They were assuming that they knew where the conversation is going. You want to jump in because you're judging where the conversation is going. It's not judgment that somebody's good or somebody's bad, like I talked about a second ago. It's just a judgment that you know best. You know what's happening next. That's a way different conversation than if you approach it with curiosity. So when you judge what somebody's going to say, you're actually missing the real opportunity in each one of those conversations that you get into. Because if you instead seek to understand, and I mean really understand, not judging that you think you know where it's going to go. Not going like, okay, yeah, I get the surface level. I'm going to fill in the gaps on my own. I understand. Let's flip it around and let's make the conversation about me now. If you seek to understand, that's the real opportunity in this. Because once we understand, and I mean fully understand where somebody's coming from, then we can empathize with them. And empathy, I used to think I lacked that. And I did for a long time until I realized really people want to feel heard and they want somebody to care about where they are and what's going on in their lives. And that's empathy. That's really the best definition that I've ever figured out how to come up with it. I'm sure that there's a better one in Webster's or whatever online dictionary I would look at. But empathy is just caring about somebody else's situation and thinking, man, I want to be able to help this person. But we can only help those people once we empathize with where they are. And we can only empathize with where they are once we understand where they are. Which is why we can't approach any conversations with judgment. We have to approach all conversations with curiosity. Now, how exactly is it that we pull this off? Because you've been having conversations your entire life, millions of conversations, or maybe even tens of millions of conversations, depending on how old you are, you've had already. So if we think that maybe we've been doing it wrong, like really, how do we do it right? The good news is that it seems to be a lot simpler than it may even sound, because there's really only a couple of steps to pulling this off. The first thing that I've found to be helpful is that I approach conversations with an intention of being curious instead of being judgmental. My son is a great example of this because I'll drive him to school and he'll say something like, for example, hey, Dad, Thursday is my favorite day. And if I was meeting that conversation with judgment, I would go, yeah, buddy, Thursday's an awesome day. Like, here's why I love Thursdays too. We want to agree with the other people because we want to be part of the same pack, but that's still meeting the conversation with judgment. Instead, setting the intention before I'm driving him to school, when he says something, I'm going to ask another question about it. Oh, why is Thursday your favorite day? What do you guys do on Thursdays? Why do you like doing that on Thursdays? Is there anything else going on the other days that isn't as good as what's going on Thursday? Well, what's going on those days? Which leads me to the second thing you've got to do in order to meet every conversation with curiosity instead of judgment. And this is simple. Ask more questions than you feel like you should. Because in reality, what we want is we want to just move on to the next conversation. We've got a million things to do. We're looking at our own to-do list and we're feeling like we're so busy because that's one of the ways that we measure status in our society, which I'm sure there'll be another video on that at some point, but we measure our status in society based on how busy we are. And that has us moving through our conversations way, 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 way too quick. Down to the conversation with my son on the way to school. What else have I got to do? We're sitting there in the truck. There's nothing else going on. We're listening. So when we ask more questions than we think we need to, then we really get to the state of understanding, which, by the way, I've found asking more questions than I feel like I need to and actually listening to the answers. That's the trick. Asking more questions than you think to and then actually listening to the answers. Really, when I feel like I've made more sales back in my life in sales, it's because I asked the extra question. Sometimes even the extra 3 questions to understand at a deeper level, just because I'm curious about how something works or why something's not working. What I really understand is going down there when it's a sales conversation is the other person feels heard. Take that into a conversation with a romantic relationship. When there's a fight there, it's because the other person didn't feel heard. Most of the time, it's based on a simple misunderstanding, and the misunderstanding is when we assume the other person thinks we know what we're thinking and we don't say it, but we think that they should know it anyway. That's meeting that interaction with judgment instead of curiosity. And maybe I didn't say it. Maybe I did say it. But we've got to understand deeper. So ask more questions. So my encouragement for you, if you want to feel less friction, less fighting in your relationships, you want to feel more connections, you want to feel closer bonds, then it's really a simple process. Set the intention to meet every single conversation that you go into just for today. Tomorrow, go back doing whatever you want to do. But just for today, go into every conversation with curiosity instead of with judgment. Which means you're not going to assume that you know where the conversation is going. You're not going to assume that you know how the person's going to finish the sentence. You're going to sit there and really want to understand where they're coming from. And you just do that by asking more questions and watch what happens in terms of how they feel when they leave that conversation. Remember that negatively charged bundle of emotions and the positively charged bundle of emotions? Both of you are going to leave every conversation with that positively charged bundle of emotions if all we do is meet them with curiosity instead of judgment. Hey, thanks for watching this. If you got anything out of this video, awesome, good for you. But if you know anybody in your life that also needs to meet more conversations with curiosity instead of judgment, I really encourage you to share this video with them. It'd mean the world to me, and it'd probably be important for them as well. So consider it like a little gift that you can give somebody that's gonna pay it forward and pay it forward and pay it forward. That's what I got for you. We'll see you guys in the next video.